Pardon the interruption, but I'm Mike Wilbon. Tony, it's National Hug a Friend Day. If we were together, would you give me a hug?
Tony Kornheiser. So you consider us friends? You do? Really?
Wow.
Yes, I would give you a hug.
Okay, well,
yes.
I was going to say, if you're not giving me a hug, I know who I'm going to save my hug for. You want to know?
Who?
Perk. I'll give my hug to Perk.
You couldn't get your arms around Perk. Perk is 6'10", 340 pounds. He's so much bigger than you. Welcome to PTI, boys and girls. In today's episode, the Sixers lose again. Dave Roberts lets Walker Buehler finish, and Phil Mickelson could be ready to return to golf. But we begin today with the Celtics sweeping the Nets out of the playoffs. The 4 games were decided by a total of only 18 points, and the Celtics won all 4. Wilbon, would you rather focus on the failure of these Nets or on the Celtics not ducking them and sweeping them?
Yeah, well, I was early on. I picked the Celtics. I credited the Celtics. I told you it was a Celtic defense that was harassing KD and Kyrie into their poor performances. So, no, we got time for the Celtics. I want to get to the Brooklyn Nets, who are an utter failure, a bigger failure than the Los Angeles Lakers. A bigger failure, Tony, stunning failure. And Kyrie Irving last night said some things in his post-game comments that to me suggest that group will continue to fail. When Kyrie basically sat there and said, well, you know, we're going forward now and I'm going to be part of management. And that's what he basically said. You know, he named everybody except Steve Nash, which is interesting because he said he didn't want to be coached, didn't need coaching. And he said, we're gonna make some deals. We're going to make some changes in the offseason. And he named everybody except Steve Nash and faulted everybody except himself. And it's like, dude, you can't manage you. You can't manage to come to work. You can't manage to be a decent teammate. You can't manage to lead a group of 4-year-olds, and now you're going to lead next year. I mean, this guy's unbelievable. Everybody wants to blame Kevin Durant because he had a couple of bad games. Are you kidding me? This guy failed the team, and now they got to bring him back at either 170 or $220 million. The failure of the Nets is the biggest story in sports today, with apologies to the draft.
Okay, I'm going to let you do the Nets, and I'm going to go to the Celtics because luckily for me, I had the great Boston Celtics historian and our longtime friend Bob Ryan on my podcast this morning. And what I said early on was, I said, I'm not sure the Celtics are a really good team, but I thought they put together a really good effort. And Ryan said to me, hold on a second, Sparky. And then Ryan, who would know this better than you and I would know this, okay. Ryan said all the great Celtics teams, if they played a series with this team would win 1 or 2 games off the Russell teams, off the Cowens-Havlicek teams, off the Bird Parrish-McHale teams, off the Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett team. He loves his team. Right. He loves the coach, loves them. And I'll just say this. There was a period of time as late as January when that team had capsized. They were under 500. And everybody was running around Boston, and they were saying, we got to trade Jason Tatum, or we got to get rid of Jaylen Brown because this isn't working. I believe you said that at one point as well. And then suddenly, according to Ryan, they listened to Udoka, and things began to work. Mike, they closed 26-6. You add the 4 against the Nets, they're 30-6 right now. No team in the NBA has a record as good as that right now. And Ryan's not even saying they're going to win the whole thing, but Ryan really likes the team, and we should listen to Bob.
That's impressive when Bob has them with he can mention them with the all-time Celtic teams you just listed. That's pretty incredible. And yes, Bob Ryan is a Celtic historian, God knows. But Tony, good. Once again, one person picked the Celtics. I don't mean just on this show. I mean like any of the shows. I picked the Celtics because I had no respect ultimately for what Brooklyn was doing this season. And now get them out. You know, it's too bad to have Kevin Durant out of the playoffs. It really is. But the rest of them, they're tired of them. Go now. The Raptors are suddenly making things interesting in their series with the 76ers. Pascal Siakam scored 23 points to lead Toronto to the win in Philly. A series that the Sixers once led 3-0 is now 3-2 and headed back to Toronto. After the game, Joel Embiid, my favorite, not yours, said, quote, we're fine. Close quote. Tony, you going to side with Embiid that Philly's fine?
So in essence, I think what you're asking me is, do I think that Philadelphia will win this series? And yes, I do. It is hard for me to imagine that Toronto will win 4 straight. Although at this point, they really only have to win 2 straight. But the accumulation is 4 straight. But let me just tell you what will happen if Toronto wins this series.
Ooh.
Doc Rivers will be fired. He's out. He's already the only person ever as a coach in the NBA to lose 3 3-1 series. This would be number 4, and it would be worse because it would be 3-0 before it was that. And so if you believe, and you've sat here and you've said that James Borrego, that it was okay for Charlotte to fire him because he got drilled in a couple of play-in games, you'd have to side with getting rid of Doc as much as you love him and I love him. He'd be gone. This is what else would happen, Mike. James Harden can't get a contract. They're going to look at him and say, well, we're not spending hundreds of millions of dollars on this guy because it's over for this guy. And one other thing, your great, dear, yappy friend, Joel Embiid, would have to shut up for a while. He'd have to shut up for a while. Now, I don't think it's going to happen. Unless you tell me Embiid can't play at all, because if he can play, he went out, got 20 and 11 last night. Harden's another story, Mike. I didn't see it coming. I was wrong about it.
No, we talked about this on your podcast this morning, and both of us, nobody accuses the two of us as being lost for words. And yet, having watched basketball as long as the two of us have, we are lost for words on Harden, right? He's like the boxer, Tone, that was, 47-1, and then all of a sudden couldn't beat tomato cans. And you go, what happened to this guy? Harden looks like that. $200 million for him going forward? Are you kidding me? But, Tony, I told you, and look, at the beginning of the series, I thought it was going 7. And then it was 2-0, and everybody jumped off, and then Embiid hit that great shot, a great shot, with his thumb injured. And you go, okay, Philly's in control of this thing, because 3-0, by any definition, is in control. But I told you yesterday, if they lost that game, they're not winning Game 6 in Toronto. I don't believe that. They are a together team. They have a certain spirit. I talked to people in that building last night, and I listened to Tim Legler, who knows Philly basketball as well as anybody ever, okay? And since, he just does. And so I heard Legler talking about the lack of energy and the lack of spirit in the building, the nervousness, the tension. Tone, there's something going on there. And I don't know if Embiid wasn't just great this season, he was dominant, okay? I mean, he had stretches like Shaq in his prime, stretches. I'm not saying he's Shaq in his prime, but he had stretches like that. And now if he can't do that, and if Harden is just some dude, like an add-on all-star, because, for injury to replace somebody, they're in some trouble, Tone. They really are.
Yeah. I'll just say this, that when we have these series that go a long way, and we analyze every single game as if it's one of the great novels in history, sometimes I feel like I'm chasing my tail like a dog. Sometimes I think I ought to shut up. We move on. Let's turn to our friend Phil Mickelson.
Phil thinks things ahead, and maybe that gets him in trouble sometimes, but he's not just sort of out there winging it. That's not Phil Mickelson. Tony, I think this is one of those where I am best served by saying, I don't know. It's confusing. There's even mystery to it. And I live a chunk of my life here in a community which Phil Mickelson holds dear. And everybody here knows him. And I don't just mean the golf course. I mean in this community, Arizona State, where he attended, where his brother has been the coach. People here know and care about and discuss Phil and feel various ways about him. And you hear a lot of doom. You hear a lot of gloom and doom about him and why he has to play golf again and why he would go and play, on the Saudi tour, by whatever name you want to call it. And it's just daunting to me to hear this. And I hope that a lot of it just isn't the case. And Phil's going to come back and play golf, and we're going to be able to relate to him in the professional way that we have for 30-plus years for Phil Mickelson. But I don't know that anymore, and there's a cloud over it, Tone.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you what I think. Just think, total speculation. I think Phil Mickelson is hoping that the PGA Tour will say to him, no, you can't play in the Saudi Golf League. And then he'll go to his good friend Greg Norman and say, I tried. I just can't do it. And then he will return to the PGA Tour and everybody will applaud and he will be triumphant and seen as a soldier who followed orders. But the exact opposite of that I consider as well, which would be this. Phil Mickelson, other than the PGA Championship last year, that was his only top 10, Mike. He missed 9 cuts. He wasn't competitive on the tour for a couple of years. He wasn't making money on the tour. Off the tour, yes. On the tour, no. All of a sudden, the Saudi Golf League comes along, and they say, we have no-cut events. We have 54-hole, no-cut events, shotgun start, and we'll give you $25 million. And Phil Mickelson may say, you know what? I'm taking it. I'm going to take that because these guys, golfers, Mike, they're independent contractors. They chase money.
Right.
Half of them don't believe they should pay income tax. So like you, I don't know, but those are the things. I also, and I'll say this very quickly, I understand the PGA Tour says if you go over there, you're barred from us. That's bluster, Mike. If 15 of the top 25 go, the PGA is going to relent, and there's going to be 2 tours. Let's take a break. Still to come.
Flashback or something. He must have been in the Wayback
If the PGA Tour doesn't have all the big guns, it's time to give each other a little wordy talk. What's first?
It's blank that Dave Roberts did not pull Walker Buehler from his gem last night.
It's uncharacteristic. Dave Roberts pulls pitchers. That's his move. Like Kershaw, who's going to Cooperstown, didn't earn the 9th a couple of weeks ago. Mike, what I think happened is that Dave Roberts got stung by the criticism and doesn't want any more of it.
Well, Tony, I'm going to agree with a lot of that, but I think what he got stung by was the pitcher standing up to him, which maybe Kershaw didn't do. And so, therefore, Dave Roberts was acquiescent. Because you're right, his move is to pull somebody the moment it looks like he's flirting with history. Dave Roberts has to take a walk out there. And I told you, I have said, when I'm this big a guy, isn't Clayton Kershaw like 6'5" or 6'6"? I mean, these are big, tight end sized dudes. All right, these pitchers. Pitchers are huge for the most part. And I would look at him and say, take it from my hand, Dave. Yes, that's what Buehler did effectively last night. Right here in the desert.
Dave Roberts has a long leash with the Dodgers because he wins all the time.
Yes, he does.
Next.
Mike Trout's check swing triple was blank.
My word is Trout affirming. I love Mike Trout. I think he's a great player. I feel sad, Mike, when he never gets into the playoffs or only a half a game out of first. So if Shohei Ohtani could hit better than 211, and if Anthony Rendon could hit better than 204, maybe this team could get to the playoffs.
Yeah, they remind me a little bit too much of Banks, Santo, and Williams, the Angels. Hall of Famers that don't even get to the postseason. He reminds me of Ernie Banks, Tone. My hero, Mike Trout, does. But I know what your baseball influences are, and you know what mine are. And I know what you had to see in part when he took out of the gate, like you mentioned, bolted out like a horse in the Kentucky Derby. You had to see one image and one image only. Pete Rose. He's wearing the white uniform with the red numbers. It could be Cincinnati. It could be Philadelphia. And Pete Rose would look at that ball going down the line, and he would know coming out of the box he was going to take third, and he might have to run over the third baseman to go in there safely. And the head-first dive, straight Pete Rose. It's Pete Rose. I'm like you, though, with Trout, man. And I'm saying, Tone, Ernie Banks never made the playoffs. Trout, it's a little scary to me.
Yeah. The Pete Rose thing, it is the slide. It's the slide that says Pete Rose. Absolutely. That's the final word. Let's take one last break. Still to come. Did Hassan Whiteside deserve to get ejected for his foul on Luka Doncic and the scuffle that followed?
And could Jay Wright end up coaching in the NBA after all?
I don't know anything about that, but that would surprise me. And happy time, people. Happy 75th birthday, Amos Otis.
In one stretch. And to me, Amos Otis was the best defensive outfielder, center fielder of his time. Look, I understand Gold Glove, tells you one thing, but Gold Glove can lie because that's voted on. Amos Otis devoured everything in center field. He was so stylish. He was like elegant. And sadly, he was gone. He was ready to retire before Kansas City took that next step, and they won. They won without him, which is too bad because he was great.
Happy anniversary, Matt Ryan. On this day 14 years ago, the Falcons selected Matty Ice out of Boston College with the 3rd overall pick. That year, the Falcons were reeling after the Michael Vick dogfighting scandal, and Ryan calmed some of the water by becoming Rookie of the Year. Ryan was the NFL MVP in 2016 and led Atlanta to a Super Bowl they should have won. A Super Bowl their owner, Arthur Blank, celebrated prematurely with Little Dance. Sadly for him, the Patriots stormed back from a 28-3 deficit and actually won the game in overtime. Ryan was never the same. His record since then is 35-45, which is why he is now out of Atlanta and in Indianapolis, where people are hoping his results will be more like Matthew Stafford's after a change of scenery than like Carson Wentz's.
Tony, I understand why they would hope that in Indianapolis and why Matt Ryan would say to himself, I've got this in me. But to me, what we've seen of Matt Ryan the last few years, that's what I call a reach. Just saying.
Happy trails, Hassan Whiteside. The Jazz big man went to stop Luka Doncic from dunking with about 5 minutes left in last night's Utah-Dallas game, and the Mavericks up by 24 at the time. Whiteside went for the ball but didn't get it, got a lot of Doncic. Whiteside appeared to throw Doncic to the ground, then stood over. A couple of Doncic's Dallas teammates came over to let Whiteside know they were none too pleased, and a tussle of sorts broke out. Whiteside was called for 2 technicals and was ejected. Reggie Bullock of Dallas also got the heave-ho. Teammate Dorian Finney-Smith got teed up as well. Afterwards, Doncic praised his teammates for coming to his aid and called Whiteside's foul, quote, nothing. Doncic had 33 points, 13 rebounds as Dallas took a 3-2 lead in the series.
I told you yesterday in the show, that Doncic is back in full effect. Not just back. Look what he did to Rudy Gobert there. But, Tone, you didn't buy when Whiteside reached both hands down to appear like he was trying to pick up Doncic. That didn't sound like you were buying that. I didn't think he was standing over him, Ali Liston style. I thought he was actually trying to say, hey, I didn't mean to hit you that hard. But, you know.
I'll give him that, but, you know, but he got hit hard. That was hard. That was hard.
He did. It was, no question.
Big finish. Here we go. Zach LaVine of your Bulls entered the health and safety protocols. Again? Your thoughts?
How many times? I mean, I've been stumping for Zach LaVine to be paid, be extended, paid the max. But you can't have this happen. What is this, 4 or 5 times? No. Jay Wright, they're in the playoffs. Jay Wright told Keyshawn, J. Will, and Max he'd be lying if he said he hadn't thought about coaching in the NBA. What do you make of that, Tom?
It's fine to coach in the NBA, not this year. Wait a little bit. Wait a little bit. Niners GM John Lynch says he can't ever imagine wanting to trade Deebo Samuel. Makes sense?
He's the greatest weapon offensively in the NFL. Why would you consider trading him? That would be dumb. An MRI on Jacob deGrom's arm showed considerable healing. You optimistic?
Get back by June. Join Max Scherzer. Last one, 3 NBA games tonight. Who you got?
Tony, I'm going to take the Hawks in the absence of Butler and Lowry. I'm going to take the Grizzlies and Suns at home. Those teams have to defend home court in Game 5s.
We're out of time. We will try and do better the next time. And I'm Tony Kornheiser.
I'm Mike Wilbon. Same time tomorrow, Knuckleheads. You can get the podcast on the ESPN app or Apple Podcasts. I'm worried about the Suns tonight, Tone. I'm stressed out. Now, here's Sports.
PTI.